Hello, I'm Professor Rad, and today we're going to make a bar graph. The bar graph we're going to make today specifically deals with whole numbers. In our next video, we'll make a bar graph that has decimal numbers in it. So I'm going to read through this example so we can kind of orient ourselves with the data, and then we'll start talking about this like graphing space a little bit, and then we'll actually get to the graph. So the example says, the table to the right gives the total yield of several vegetables grown in the United States in 2019, measured in hundredweight per acre, or CWT per acre, as reported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We're going to illustrate this data in a bar graph. Okay, so we've got hundredweight per acre. That's how much of each of these crops was grown. And I can see that the yield, the number of crops, they're all positive numbers. They're all whole numbers here. And let's see, it looks like the smallest one is 90 and the biggest is the 630. So they got mostly carrots and the least amount were beans. So when I look at this grid that's been set up for me, I notice that this vertical axis, so when it goes up and down, we call it a vertical axis. When it goes left to right, we call that a horizontal axis. So this vertical axis is essentially like a number line, but it's going up and down instead of left to right. Okay, so that's why it's in our chapter about number lines. I also noticed that they've labeled it yield counterweight per acre because that was the name of this column here. And we really need to make sure it goes up to that biggest number of 630. Just like when we made number lines, it had to make sure it went up to the biggest number. So it looks like they've labeled every 100, and then there's a line halfway between. So half of 100 is 50. So if this is 500, 550, 600, 650. So we are really close to that 630, but we are above it. So to create our bar graph, what we're going to do is we're going to draw bars that go up to the height indicated. So let's start out with the beans. They have a yield of 90 hundredweight per acre. So I've got to find about where 90 would be on this number line. So if I think of this like a number line, here's my 0, 50, 100. 90 is going to be just underneath that 100. So I'm going to draw my first bar so that it ends just underneath that 100. And I'm going to label that beans. All right, let's do the next one. Now the carrots, it's so funny they put the small one next to the big one. So the carrots go up to 630. So this is almost that top line because remember we said that was like 650. And by the way, if it helps you to write in those in-between numbers, absolutely do so. Okay, so if we want to put our 50s in here just for reference, we can. I know sometimes it's easy to figure something out and then think we're going to remember it and then immediately forget it, right? So if labeling these halfway numbers helps you, please do that. All right, so for the carrots, we have to go up to 630. So I'm going to take a pencil to kind of help me out here since it's so big and I have to traverse that space. So if this is 600 and this is 650, about halfway through would be like 625. So I'm going to put a little guideline here for me. Oh gosh, try to keep it about halfway between. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'm just lightly penciling in a line about halfway between 600 and 650. So I have a reference line there for my 630. It's going to be a little bit above the halfway point. So I'm going to draw my line for my bar going up here. I'm at 625, so I want to be just a little bit above that. And then we can come back down. And then I'll label that carrots. All right, so that is pretty much what we're going to do for each of these types of vegetables. Oh, I like cucumbers. Well, I do. I like cucumbers, but I really like this number 150 because each of these was being counted by 50s. So that means it's going to go exactly to one of those lines. So I'm going to skip a little space after the carrots bar and draw this next bar going up to 150, come back down, and I'm going to call that one cucumbers. Kind of squishing my writing here. So also, yeah, because I'm squishing my writing, sometimes you can write it vertically. So write the word sideways so you can fit them a little bit better. But I didn't want to keep turning this paper around and kind of making things go crazy. So that's why I didn't do that. The next one we've got is lettuce, and that's going to go up to 360. So here's 350. So 360 is going to go a little bit above that line. So 350, okay. Oops, that should go a little bit, should go right up. Oh, above that line. Haha. All right, so again, I'm being brave using pen, aren't I? Really should be using pencil here, but that's okay. So 350 is a little bit above that line, or 360 is a little above the 350 line, and that's our lettuce. You know, I've got white out around here somewhere if I really wanted to, but I'll show you how we can fix that in a little bit. Then we have onions, which are at 540. That's going to be just under the 550. So here's 550. So 540 is just under that. I could also mention if I wanted to be really careful here, I could be using a ruler, but I'm just sketching the idea to get this, you know, the idea of it. So here are onions. And lastly, pumpkins are at 220. So I'm going to go to 200. There's 250. I'm going to do like a halfway in between these two lines. Kind of halfway here. That would be like 25. So 220 is going to be just under that. Okay, and that's our pumpkins. Okay, and then what I like to do, I like to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bars. So that's a good little check. Now there are 2 more things that my graph needs, and then there are 2 things that are optional for my graph. So let's deal with the things we need. First, I pointed out before that the left-hand side was labeled the same as this category. We want to do that with the horizontal axis as well. So we want to make sure that our horizontal axis is labeled vegetable. So whatever label they use on the table is what you want to use on the axis. So those should match up. The second thing we want our graph to have is a title. Now, if you end up taking a statistics course in the future, you might learn about some very specific titling techniques for graphs. For us right now, all I'm looking for is some kind of descriptor for what's going on with this data. So I'm going to go back to this block of text, and it just says the table to the right gives the total yield of several vegetables grown in the United States in 2019. Okay, so I might title this something to do with vegetables that are in the US in 2019. Those are kind of my keywords. So maybe I'll call it 2019 US veggies. Sure, why not? 2019 US vegetables. Okay, so we've got that. So this would be enough to get us the full credit for our graph. Now, the 2 optional things. Optional thing number 1, especially if you're making your graph with pencil, it might be a little bit hard to see the lines of the bar graph against the lines of the grid, or if you have graph paper. So what you can do is you can shade in the bars. So I usually do some slanted lines like that, but you could use a highlighter to color in the bars as well. Sometimes my adult students say their kids help them do the coloring. So if you've got a toddler that can color in the lines, or, you know, a little kid who likes to color, they can certainly color in the lines for you. This is where we get to kind of, yes, let's mask our mistake here so it's like it never happened. Ta-da! Now, while I'm coloring these in, I should also mention I didn't do a super great job of keeping everything the same distance. Ideally, if you have graph paper, you can space these out a little bit better than what I did freehand here. Or if you have a ruler, you can draw your bars a little bit more evenly, a little bit straighter than what I drew here. But you know, I'm just doing my best with the tools I have. That's all we can ask anyone to do, right? Okay, so that's optional to color in the bars. You don't have to color them in. The other things that's optional, especially if you're going to be presenting this graph to somebody and hoping for them to get information from it, is you can put data labels above the bars. So for example, for the beans, we had 90. So you could write 90 above that bar. For the carrots, we had 630. So we could put 630 above the carrots bar, and so on. So this just really helps whoever is looking at our graph. When we had to make approximations for our heights, they can tell where those bars are ending. All right. So let's see what I've got over here. So that's our bar graph. I've of course got one for you to try on your own. So let me zoom in a little bit so you can see the data better. Sorry for the shake. We're still pretty much an amateur at filming in this manner, but we're doing our best with the tools we have, as I said. So here's the Now You Try problem, and you're going to be graphing some temperatures for a variety of cities in New England. In the next video, we'll be making another number line, and that number line is going to have decimal numbers instead of whole numbers. So, looking forward to seeing you in that one. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye for now, everyone.